What is up, weather enthusiasts? I'm your host, Pat's Path Predictor. Let's get right into the weather. Alright, so here's the situation we have for you, ladies and gentlemen. Well, first of all, I am back, guys. I am back recording a forecast video for the first time in about a month and a half, actually. Been busy with school, everything like that, dealing with all that very busy semester. I just got off for the semester. Everything went really well. I'm really happy with how things turned out. But anyway, enough about me. What I'm going to be doing today is something I did back in January, where I analyzed some possible stuff going on with the 2024 hurricane season and possible indicators of what may be happening. Well, we have a lot more data that dropped in the last month, and we're going to be covering it all, as well as giving an official Pat's Path Predictor and Storms United forecast as to what kind of tropical activity we are going to be seeing, because a lot of things have been changing since last year. Well, what happened in 2023? Here's what we saw happen in 2023. Let's go ahead and go to that season. We had 21 tropical depressions. We had 20 named storms, 7 hurricanes, and 3 major hurricanes. Hurricane Idalia, Hurricane Lee, and Hurricane Franklin, I believe it is. Yep, Hurricane Franklin. So, yeah, and keep in mind, this all took place during an El Nino year, which typically causes hurricane activity in the Atlantic to fall and hurricane activity in the Pacific, to rise. And we still had a very above average season with 20 tropical storms, 7 hurricanes right there, and 3 majors. The named storms are above average. The hurricanes and major hurricanes were around average. And I've been saying this for the last couple of years. It seems to me that above average is becoming the new average. So we're going to have to pay very close attention to that. And that's what we had in 2023 with an El Nino year. Here's what we're looking at in 2024 so far. 2024 is looking out to be a very active hurricane season already, with multiple indicators. Colorado State University, this is the one I've been paying attention to the most, is calling for 23 named storms, 11 hurricanes, and 5 major hurricanes. Here's the averages right here for reference right there. So already another above average hurricane season. Some of these have gone a little crazy. University of Pennsylvania and Philadelphia is calling for 33 named storms, with some indicators saying they're going to go as high as 39. We're going to pump the brakes on that real quickly right there, because I know you just heard that. And I'm going to be completely honest right there. It's too early to say it's going to be that many storms. But basically, taking a look at Colorado State University's forecast right here, named storms is 23 and everything like that. Here's the parameters right there. The accumulated cyclone energy is something I want to pay attention to. This is the average that we have between 1991 and 2020, the 30-year average, and that's 123. What Colorado State University is anticipating is a number of 210, which means that we're looking at maybe stronger systems, stronger hurricanes, stronger tropical cyclones that are going to be lasting longer out in the Atlantic Ocean. So either way, that's going to be a pretty crazy scenario that we're looking at right there. And now you're probably wondering, what are the parameters? Why are we looking at a very active hurricane season going into 2024? Well, here's what we're looking at, and we're going to go ahead and go off of this stuff one by one. First thing we're looking at is global sea temperatures. The temperatures from 2023 were insanely warm, and the reason the El Nino didn't really have as much of an effect on the amount of storms in the Atlantic hurricane season was because the Atlantic SSTs were so warm and so much higher than average that it effectively canceled out the effects that the El Nino down in Peru and down in over here caused right here. And that right there is pretty crazy if you think about that. And those SSTs have not gone away, and they're starting to warm up once again. We're looking at 28 plus degrees Celsius waters already across much of the Caribbean Sea. And this is from what was left over from last year at that point. 30 plus degrees Celsius in parts of the main development region. Over here, the Gulf Stream is really starting to ramp up in intensity. 26 plus degree Celsius temperatures across much of the Atlantic Ocean, right? Not the Atlantic, but the Gulf of Mexico, and 28 plus in the Bay of Campeche over here. So, yeah, already we're looking at an area that is very primed for hurricane development already in the month of or in mid-May so far. That's what the first thing we're taking a look at right there as well. And we are expecting these SSTs to continue to warm up as we continue to move into June, as we continue to move into July, into August, even into September, early September. So that already seeing 30 plus degrees Celsius temperatures across parts of the Caribbean and main development region is alarming enough. So that's the first parameter we are taking a look at right here. The second thing we're taking a look at right here is the ENSO forecast. What we are expecting this year is a La Nina. Where we are at right now is a neutral phase in the ENSO cycle right here. We have our 1 to 2 and 3 and 4 regions right here. The 1 plus 2 region, which is pretty much off the coast of Peru and Ecuador, in that region over there, has plummeted to a value of pretty much negative 0.786, which means we're looking at much colder than average temperatures right here. The SST anomalies based off of the climatology from 1981 to 2010, we're already way below average in one of the two important regions for the ENSO area right there. If we can go ahead and show you another map right here on tropical tidbits to show you kind of what we're looking at. Here's the analysis tools for the ocean analysis. This is what we're looking at right here. We're looking at from where we were even 4 months ago, a much colder area across the ENSO region right here, where we have these waters that are just completely crashing in temperature. We're seeing a lot of waves move through, like some Kelvin waves and some Rossby waves moving through that are just really cooling this down and allowing this to even spread out into parts of the Central Pacific Ocean, which is where this 3 and 4 region are. And this is why this is a neutral area right here. This is arguably the more important of the two indices that we're paying attention to. We're right at average right there, folks. We're right at average, and it's going to expect to continue to plummet as we continue to move into June, into July, into August, where we could see possibly a really large La Nina happen. So here's what we're looking at right here for the official forecast. So we're looking at a neutral phase for right now. We're looking at a neutral phase for much of June, although the La Nina may start to encroach on that as we continue to move into the later weeks of June. By July, though, it's looking like it's going to be a 50-50 chance of it either staying neutral or it moving to a La Nina. And if it does move into a La Nina, I do anticipate, based on the current trends that we are seeing, it's going to be doing it either early or the middle of July. That's my current anticipation as of right now. This forecast was based off of May 9th. We've seen a lot more indicators in the past few days of what's going on. But either way, what we're looking at is a 50-50 chance of a neutral or La Nina, which could really cause some problems, especially in the later half of July. And then what we're looking at for August, September, October, we're looking at a pretty strong La Nina going into it as of right now. So we're going to have to pay a very close attention to that at this current point in time here. Here's what we're looking at with the probabilities. Once again, this was based in April right here. The chances for a La Nina in June, July, and August have really shot up in May compared to April. So we're looking at an earlier La Nina entrance than what we were initially anticipating at this current point. So just another thing to pay attention to as we continue to move into this. What's the La Nina going to do, Patrick? You're talking about all this ENSO stuff that we probably don't understand, but what's the La Nina going to do? Here's what it's going to do. It's going to weaken the wind shear. It is going to weaken the wind shear at pretty much across much of the Atlantic Ocean. That's what this stuff typically does. When you see an El Nino happen, you see stronger trade winds, which are your easterly winds that move across much of the Atlantic and across the tropics and everything like that. So you're going to see, with an El Nino, you see stronger trade winds, which in turn cause stronger wind shear, which in turn causes less tropical development. What you're going to see with a La Nina this time, though, is you're going to see weaker trade winds, and you're going to see less shear across the Atlantic Ocean, and you're going to see, in turn, more tropical development. The wind shear, as of right now, is about what you would expect for the month of May right here. 60 to 70 knots across much of the tropics right there. That's expected to weaken considerably even in the next month or so as we continue as we kind of move more away from spring and more towards the summer, and as hurricane season starts to ramp up, you start seeing that shear decrease at a pretty quick rate across much of the tropics. We can go ahead and pull up some models right there and kind of show you what we're potentially looking at when it comes to shear anomaly right here. Here's the CANSIPs. Unfortunately, it's not available yet. They're not going to do that. So we'll go ahead and use kind of a more short-term forecast right here to kind of give you an understanding of what we're looking at. We're going to be mainly using the GFS. I don't like using it because it goes so far out and it's fantasy land at that point, but I think it's a clear indicator of what we're looking at. Wind shear across much of the area is going to be somewhat below average as we continue to move into May and all that stuff, and that above average wind shear really starts to collapse. We start to see a ridge build up across parts of the central Atlantic over there, or the Leeward and Windward Islands are the Lesser Antilles, and even into the Greater Antilles, we start seeing weaker than average wind shear. We're starting to see wind shear values into the 30, even 20 knots of wind shear right there, which for the month of May, that's pretty concerning to say the very least, and that is expected to continue to decrease as we continue to move into July, as we continue to move into August, and as we continue to move into September. So that's what we have going on with the wind shear, and one of the final reasons that we're looking at this being a very active season is really kind of what we're looking at with the kind of the moisture and the Sahara dust possibility right here, because in the past you have this wind shear dome collapse starting around early to mid-July across much of the Atlantic Ocean, which you would think would be perfect for tropical development because of the warm water. You have plenty of vorticity at that point. You have plenty of weak wind shear. You have lots of, and you don't have moisture though. That's the thing. You don't have the moisture to really initialize and really allow this stuff to breathe, grow, and develop. So that's what we have going on, and this is what we're paying attention to. We're using the CANSIPS model. We're going to use the NMME model to kind of show you what we're potentially looking at. For the month of June, let's go ahead and analyze this real quickly. They're expecting a very active intertropical convergence zone. You see those huge moisture gradients above average right there. Huge accumulated precipitation above average over here. That's essentially an indicator of what your moisture is going to look like for the month of June. The month of May, you're still having an active ITCZ, but it's still further to the south. It's going to be moving further and further to the north as we continue to move into June and July right there, so we're going to have to pay very close attention to it. Another thing in June is we're expecting a very moist Caribbean Sea, a much more moist Caribbean Sea than average across pretty much the Antilles, across Puerto Rico, the Dominican Republic, and Cuba right there. Not all of that may be an indicator of tropical development, just a quick disclaimer right there. However, considering what we're potentially looking at, considering what this does indicate, is pretty concerning to me, because let's say we have these massive amount of moisture and we have across the Caribbean and across the ITCZ. Well, one other thing that we need to take into consideration is the Sahara dust. That's the reason why we don't see tropical cyclones starting to pop off all the time in mid to late July, because the Sahara dust still hasn't weakened enough to do that. But if we're seeing much more moist anomalies in the month of June, especially across much of the Caribbean, that Sahara dust if it enters the Caribbean, that could really, if I'm going to be honest, that could not really be as much of a factor or an inhibitor to tropical development, because if you're seeing a much more moist gradient than what we were initially anticipating and what we've seen in previous years, that Sahara dust isn't really going to do that much to stop tropical development. And at that point, that's going to be more so a shear issue and less so a moist air issue. And we've seen tropical cyclones develop in relatively high wind shear events. We've seen it with Fiona. We've seen it with a few other storms. We are going to have to pay very close attention to that. Here's what we're looking at for the month of July. That moisture gradient is really moist. Like, that moisture gradient is really high, all the way from Illinois down through the main development region right there. Now, granted, this Midwestern stuff may have stuff to do with what's going on with mid-latitude cyclones, with we're looking at with potential severe weather, potential rainstorms, everything like that. That's mainly non-tropical elements working right there. But if you go down to Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, and the rest of the Gulf states, as well as the Carolinas and Georgia, that is going to be also pretty interesting, especially considering what we're looking at with how this is kind of oriented. We're seeing a much stronger ITCZ than average. The Caribbean is going to be very moist across that. So the Sahara dust, what's Sahara dust at that point? You're not going to see very much of that enter the Caribbean because of how much moisture we're looking at compared to what we were looking at in years past. And even in the Gulf of Mexico, we're seeing a lot more moisture than what we've seen in years past. I can pull up unfortunately, I can't pull up past models to kind of show you what we were looking at before, but what I can say is that this is some of the biggest jumps and some of the highest moisture content I have seen in a very long time right here. And what we're looking at right here even goes up towards the Bahamas and everything like that. So I would say June for the June, July, and July and August for the Caribbean looks concerning right there. June especially, because part of that too could be maybe rainstorms that form that are just like tropical waves and stuff like that. But the fact that we're seeing a weaker than we're seeing a stronger moisture gradient, and possibly that won't do much to this, inhibiting tropical cyclones is pretty concerning. Here's what we're looking at for August. It's a lot more spread out across much of the Atlantic, especially in the Pacific, not the Pacific, but the Gulf of Mexico. Caribbean still stays very moist right there, and that is still very persistent and very concerning, because at that point the wind shear is pretty much gone, and at that point, you have really not much stopping any tropical development unless we see a massive increase in the wind shear at that current point in time. So that's August. And September, we have that ITCZ moving up pretty much right there. We have a lot of tropical waves moving off the coast of Africa that are going to cause development. And this is when we're going to expect hurricane season to be at its peak pretty much annually. Still, for the last 4, and then even into October and November, we're looking at a lot stronger moisture than anticipated. And at that point, the Sahara dust isn't going to do anything, especially after late July, early August. If there is Sahara dust that's going to be moving through, there's not going to be that much to really stop it at that current point in time or anything like that. At that point, it's solely wind shear, and considering what we're dealing with La Nia, that wind shear is going to be much weaker than average, and it's going to have to work a lot harder to stop these tropical cyclones from developing. So that's what we're looking at right there with the moisture, and that's why I'm really concerned about all of this right there, primarily due to the fact that we're just looking at a much more moist environment than we have seen, even more moist than 2020, you could argue, at this current point. So that's why I'm really making this video, to kind of alert you of what's going on and what we may be seeing this year, and why we're looking at an active hurricane season for 2024. So now we're going to go ahead and pivot a little bit, and I'm going to introduce you to a couple of new tools that the Pat's Path Predictor channel and Storms United are going to be using, starting with our tropical forecasts. The first thing we're going to be using is this index right here. Shout out my tropical professor for introducing me to this. This is the Madden-Julian oscillation map right here, or Madden-Julian oscillation indicator right here, or MJO. We're going to call it the MJO because that's what the acronym is. What the MJO does is essentially it moves pretty much from the west to the east and across the globe. And what it does, it's kind of a contributor to more active patterns of tropical activity. We've seen tropics across the globe this year where the MJO really kicks in and where it really gets strong. I can go ahead and show you the latest 90 days just to kind of show you. Especially in February and March, we had a very strong MJO across the maritime continent and the Western Pacific, and we had tropical storms, a lot of more tropical systems fire up there than what you'd see without an MJO. It's basically a cycle that allows for more tropical development to initiate. So that's something we're going to have to pay attention to right there, and especially if it moves through the Western Hemisphere and Africa right there, because that's what's going to enhance our tropical waves moving through Africa and moving into the Atlantic Ocean. So we're going to have to pay attention to that, and that's one of the new things we are going to show you. So This is just something new for me to use. So just I am a little wonky with it at first, please bear with me. This is a new concept that even I'm going to try. So that's the first thing. Second thing we're going to use is the climate reanalyzer right here for pretty much average North Atlantic SST temperatures. You guys have seen this before, but we are going to be introducing this at a larger scale than before, primarily because we're going to be using this to track what this and the 2023 SST temperatures on average across the Atlantic. Because 2023, as you can see, was a record-breaking year when it comes to how warm the SSTs were, and 2024 is either higher than that or matching that, based on what we're looking at this current point in time. And this is something we're going to be paying attention to, because more warm water means more deep warm water, and how deep that water gets will indicate how much ocean heat content gets. And pretty much ocean heat content, as you remember from last year, is pretty much how much fuel a tropical cyclone can get as we continue to move through through a body of water. And as the cyclone taps into potentially even very high OHC values, we start to see very, very, very explosive intensification possibly. We've seen it numerous times on the Pat's Path Predictor channel. Most infamously last year was with Lee. And Otis, and Otis as well, since that really destroyed Acapulco off the western coast of Mexico. Now we're going to go ahead and go to the final part right there. You're probably asking, what is your prediction for the hurricane season? We saw the thumbnail, we saw the title. What's your prediction right now? Here's my prediction when it comes to that. I actually agree with Colorado State University. I think what we're going to be seeing is, I said this in January, we're going to be seeing greater than 20 named storms. We're going to be seeing greater than, I believe, 7 hurricanes. We're going to see what I believe is 4 or more major hurricanes. That's where I draw it right there. I'm not going to give a specific amount. Colorado State University says 23. I agree with them on that based off of everything I was able to analyze and everything I was able to look at. Because we're seeing a La Nia year. We're seeing a lot weaker wind shear, and we're going to see a lot more OHC across the Atlantic because the temperatures really haven't cooled off, especially in the Caribbean. And that's why I'm so concerned. And I think the greatest threat this year for hurricanes and for tropical cyclones is in the Caribbean, because those temperatures really did not cool off last year. So anything that gets in there has a huge probability to explosively intensify. And that's my concern. Now, granted, there could be a possibility where we could see even more storms than 23. We saw that with 2020 when we saw similar parameters to that. When I was talking with Ethan WX, he was also telling me that this could be a 2017 type situation where we have pretty much more strong storms than what than average, kind of like what we saw with Harvey, Irma, Maria, and all those things. Now, I'm not going to comment on that because it's too early in the season to say if we're going to see like 25 named storms or if we're going to see like 6 major hurricanes or anything like that. I don't know. What I do know is the conditions are going to be very favorable for explosive tropical development across the Atlantic, especially in the Caribbean and in the Gulf Stream. And that's where I'll leave it for you guys today. With that being said, we're closing the video out right here. If you'd like to join us and you'd like to help us broadcast and forecast for this hurricane season, be sure to join the Storms United Discord server. The link to it is right over there. Otherwise, be sure to subscribe to the channel and like this video if you enjoyed it. It helps us out, helps us make more videos like these. The goal of this channel, as always, is to get more people engaged with weather. And with that being said, have a wonderful day, guys. Stay safe.